So here we are again, Anthony.
We
Thank you
are.
for joining me on ITPR Unpacked.
Again, it's good to be back.
How are you?
Excited. I'm good. I'm good. Busy at the moment, but all good.
Good.
Excited
It's good
for.
to hear. So today we're going to be digging into how to communicate with the media, and this
Mhm.
really struck me because um, in the news there was a story about the former boss of ASDA and
Mm.
M&S talking about how working from home is not real work.
Mm.
So the debate about working from home versus working remotely has raised its ugly head again.
Mm.
And something else which happened this week was that the new incoming, or not president now, he is
Yeah.
Trump, um, and his compatriot Elon Musk have ordered federal workers back to the office as well for fear of to improve productivity. So we'll be touching a
Mm.
little bit about that, and then also with the fact that because the workforce is so disparate
Mm.
these days, how do we effectively communicate with them? So
Yeah.
does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Good. All right. Well, let's unpack it.
Let's do it.
So, this week we're going to touch upon how we can effectively communicate with the media.
Yeah.
But I have to say, one thing that raised its head, or one topic that raised its
Mm.
head in the news recently, was the former ASDA boss and former M&S boss
Mm.
saying that working from home is not real work. And when you think about that, but also with the fact that President Trump has
Mm.
just issued an executive order
Yeah.
forcing federal workers back to the office, we were talking about it. Well, how do you then communicate with a workforce that is, half at home or fully in the office, and how that has
Mm.
changed over the last few years? So we thought that'd be a good topic to
Yeah.
get stuck into, because there's some generational divisions in there about somehow
Yeah.
certain
Definitely.
people like to be communicated with. So yeah, I think that's a good place to start. And I will just have to say, for absolute
Mm.
honesty, that we moved back to the office last
We
year,
did.
and we have found it personally, personally, but also I think collectively, beneficial moving back to the office.
Absolutely. Yeah. I struggle to work more than a couple of days at home.
Yeah,
It just I get too distracted. But
yeah,
I like people, and it's nice to have a set routine for things. And I
yeah,
think we're flexible enough in our profession to do that.
yeah,
So I certainly think the retail sector, where these two people have come from,
yeah.
a little bit different, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it works for us, and we're still very flexible. But
Yeah,
we like having that kind of central base where we can bring people together.
we do, we do definitely. And I think also you need to drill into kind of the statistics around some of that.
Yeah,
With the BBC and other organisations sort of reporting, 86% of bosses say that remote working harms team bonding,
yeah.
which I potentially disagree with.
Well, it's
Depends.
interesting that you
Yeah.
disagree with it. Whereas I would sit on that side, because I think working remotely, yes, you can build a culture with people, remote first companies, and we work for a few organizations that
Mm,
do have a remote first company, and they have a very strong culture. But I feel like you have to work at it very hard, and it works for some companies and it doesn't work for others. So I don't think it should be one rule for one, and that's it. It should be,
no,
it's what's best for your business.
it is, and I think it is what's best for your business. But also, I think it's a case of building that kind of bonding up. So you wouldn't just be like fully remote because you really struggle, and there's statistic and
Mm,
paper after paper to show
yeah.
that that does harm team bonding.
Yeah, well,
You know,
you've very diligently done your own research into this. Have you
always like to
prepared? Yeah,
research.
yeah.
Always like
So,
to
yeah,
research.
a couple of stats that you've got.
But yeah, if you flip it around now, so again, 80% of bosses, who they feel that remote work also reduces knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, it probably would do if you don't have the right culture in place. So it's almost like it's not tripping up, but it's certainly highlighting flaws in
Right. Yeah.
organizational culture and communication in there. Because also, if you flip that around, 60% of employees, so that's employees, they say that remote working helps their work-life balance and actually supports them
Mm.
bonding with other team members. So there's a divide there between
Well,
leadership and staff,
that's
right?
what I was going to come on to. Is that not a generational divide? Is it the older generation, the more senior generation, maybe the more weathered generation like myself, who prefer the older ways of doing it? The classic, oh, in my day,
Yeah.
we had to go to the office. Whereas the generation coming through now are like, well, and I know this is true to
Yeah.
they don't want that, and they have different ways and different views of working, and so there's a pure generational division within businesses now that people have to cater for,
Mm.
which is why I think flexibility, yes, I'm all for it, but I'm just not sure whether it should be a hard and fast rule, one or the other. And so, executive orders and comments from former business leaders within major industries, I don't think help
Yeah.
what the new work cultures is. But your point about generating the right culture is very interesting
Mm.
because if you've got the right culture, then it shouldn't necessarily matter, right?
Yeah, I think it would strengthen that. I think that there's many, many cases, and we'll put some in the links when this podcast does go out, because there's some great studies to show
Hmm.
how it can really help teams to bond. But also, people that I talk to, people that you talk to, I was
Mm,
talking to a few freelancers and a few people that have moved into that space.
yeah.
Having a couple of days at home, sort the admin out, kind of structure your working week as best you can. It says I can sense from that smile
Yeah.
there's something coming. But again, no, I think it comes down to, yes, generational views on what work is and what work isn't.
Mm,
But equally, you need to move with the times,
yeah.
and the dirty words you mentioned before with initials,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
C or the P word,
Yeah.
has forced the hand. It's just forced the hand to accept.
Yeah. And I agree. And the reason why the hairs on my neck bristled slightly when you mentioned about having admin days, and I just I see the benefit.
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
do. And I think this is where maybe this is just my own point of view, or probably is my own point of view. But yes, having work from home days or days at home where you can get through a lot of things is
Mm,
great, and I think that. But just say just it's the classic. Oh yeah, I have an admin day at home. That really irritates me to a certain extent. 'Cause I'm like, well, how do you think people coped with admin when we were working from the office 5 days a week?
yeah.
Like we just did it anyway. We either did it in the office and we learned to shut the distractions out
Mm.
and crack on, or we built it around our existing work responsibilities anyway. And maybe that's the wrong way of doing it because it's not the modern way of doing it. And yes, there is a benefit, and I'll be the first to admit I do like a day working from home where I can get through deep thought tasks, and I think I don't mind that. And what makes me bristle is oh yeah, I just want an admin day, so I'll work from home. I'm like, no, do your admin.
So
Like,
pick one of those
you should be
points then.
better at your
Okay.
admin.
So without backtracking and pausing and re-recording
Go-
this,
no, go
you
on.
know, admin day perhaps wasn't the right phrase. However, there are certain things that you may not need to be in the office to do.
Yeah,
So why go
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
just for the sake of that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also, it's that classic thing of, oh, I've got X and Y to do. I've got a little bit of report to update. I've got this to
Mm,
do.
mm,
Yes, you fold it around your day, but if something else really important comes up that day, and yeah, it's that classic thing of, well, it could happen all the time.
yeah, yeah,
I just think with the flexibility that's built in and the trust that's built in businesses, in this one
yeah,
and other ones, if you've got a massive article to write and you've
yeah,
got a few things to do, or it's back to back calls, what's the point in going all the way into the office, having that extra commute to then just do everything you could have done at home?
yeah. No, I
And
agree.
structure it around. So maybe admin day wasn't the right word, and but I do think sometimes those phrases are thrown out, and half of that was just kind of just
Yeah,
to poke a button and you see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah.
But equally, I think those phrases are thrown out a bit. I've read one that irritated me. I mean, I'm 40 pretty much now this year, and you sort of some of the phrases that come out of more my social battery's drained by going in the office 5 days a week. That does grate on me a little bit
Yeah,
because
yeah, but well, I think that's just because the way that we're built, and
yeah.
the industry that we work in, and I still firmly stand by the fact that we are in public relations, and the clues in the title, it's about relations,
Yeah.
and that is one of our big campaigns this year is to put some of the
Mm,
relations back into public relations. So I do firmly stand by that, but just to kind of bring us back a little bit, because we're and avoid going down a wormhole of around the working from home
yeah.
and working in the office debate. The big thing for that, and what we're talking about here, is when we're communicating with an audience now, and with our
Mm,
audiences, which are journalists, a lot of those have actually moved out of the office and
yeah.
moved back home, and their home might not be in the city anymore. It might not be in London, might not be in Manchester. It could be quite remote, because they're journalists. They do a lot of writing. Some people like peace when they write. That's fine. And so we have had to change over the last 2,
Mm.
3 years how we adapt our communication with specific journalists based upon their working
Yeah,
habits. And that's changed the media engagement landscape, I think.
massively, massively so. Again, it's a lot harder now to meet face to face, as you've sort of said,
Mm,
or even to make phone calls. Kind of those things, and it's
yeah,
having central points. Oh, I'm in London for a couple of days.
yeah.
Who's around for a meetup, or I'm in X place.
Yeah, so this is it. So how do we engage with the media in 2025? That's kind of the core topic that we want to uncover,
Unpack.
unpack.
There you go.
Thank
There
you
you
very
go.
much today. Um, so, is do phone calls still work?
Big question. Um, yes and no. So
Okay.
I'm finding a lot more
How's it? What's it like?
negativity
Comfortable
toward
sat on that
phone
fence.
calls. The fence is quite comfy. It, phone calls for me are still the best medium, I feel, for getting a yes or no,
Hmm.
or more information. I think emails are almost thrown away and you're waiting for a response.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you look at some recent sort of statistics. 2023 survey from Muckrack showed that 92% of journalists favour email pitches.
Okay.
Um, yeah, you have that's a lot of emails, but then trying to follow up with phone calls, I think is a dying practice in itself, and it's
Yeah.
practicalities as
Yeah.
well.
Well, so it's the classic response that we get all the time. I read all my emails.
Mm,
You hear it from journalists all the time. I read all my emails. If I don't respond to you, the pitch is not for me. Therefore, I don't need a phone call from you to follow up to tell me that to ask me again for me to tell you that I'm not interested. You should get the hint the first time, right? But to me, I
well,
think okay, that's fine if you're checking all your emails, but you know it's a balance between the pressures that we're under from the client because we need to show to the client, we have tried to contact this journalist and
yeah,
we've
yeah,
been rebuffed. And if we can go back to the client, and I think this is where sometimes um, we are so involved in our own industries and we just need to be a little bit more empathetic as
hmm
to, the person as the journalist and us as the PR people. Is that they're under pressure? Yeah, we get that. They need to get the news out there and write good stories. But we're also under pressure from our client because all of our clients believe that their story is the best story in the world and that it should
correct.
be on the front page of the BBC, etc. So
Yeah,
we have to juggle that balance between look, we have spoken to this journalist, and these are the reasons why they don't find your story interesting. Getting that feedback
yeah.
is much easier, I would argue, over the phone than it is on email.
Yeah, it is. But we have to factor in there's what 6 or 7 of us for every journalist now. I think it's
Yes, yeah, that's true.
from in the 80s there was
Of
two
us, you
to
mean
one.
PR people? Yeah,
Yeah, PR people, outstanding citizens, of course, of
yeah.
PR, of best practice. But no, I think that's true. I actually find it's funny because there's a few journalists I've emailed and had nothing back. So I'll try the direct number that I've got, or I'll try the switch.
Mm,
Spoken to them, and they've said, "Oh, just send it to me again with like resend on it, or
yeah,
some code word for them."
yeah.
Or in some instances, they give me a different email for them.
Right, yeah,
But again, I think this comes down to building relationships and that kind of marketing you word, but hyper personalization, and kind of really understanding journalists. And dare I say this, mic drop moment, relationships.
yeah. Well, it's about knowing your
Yeah.
audiences, isn't it? Really. So, I think for me, we're seeing more and more AI generated content,
Mm.
and there's a big debate raging on LinkedIn at the moment
So,
around M dash and Oxford commas to try and pick out whether that's AI generated content. And we've spoken about this before in a previous podcast about the use of AI in PR. And anybody that is using AI to fully rely on AI to write pitches and write content, that's not the way forward. And
no,
I
absolutely
and
not.
I absolutely against that. It should be used as a tool. I think was what you were saying.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if we could give some practical tips on how to communicate with the media, would you're the expert in this area. Would you give any practical tips of what people can do or how they can improve in 2025?
Yeah. I will say before I say that is that the dash has been around for longer than AI. That's that's an old thing. So I think that's a damp squib, to be honest with you.
Yeah, fair enough.
This goes back to any advice I would give to anybody is know your journalist, understand what channels they use.
Hmm.
Yeah, you might get knocked back, but really understand what they're writing about. Make it as personalized to them as you can.
Hmm.
It's not rocket science. This, It's simple
Shh,
relationships.
don't tell the clients that.
Don't tell the clients that. No, it's like being given the ingredients to a cake. Not everybody can make one
Yeah,
as good
yeah,
as we can, or
yeah.
as I can, or you can, or somebody else can. I think it's that, but it's understanding. As you said, actually, it's understanding that the human beings at the end of the day.
Mm,
And if you've got a story that works for them, then try and just be kind. I think that's another thing, and it's appreciate their time and it's respect that. I've had one recently where I've been trying to get hold of quite a high profile journalist. Email wasn't working. There was no phone number, and you try and win the switchboard, and they say send an email. Well, LinkedIn approach,
right.
got a response quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just send across here. Here's my email. I'll look out for it, and it's building that rapport up. So that would be one of the things that I would say.
Yeah, so coming back to the generational divide thing then,
Yeah.
so some of the older journalists, older,
Mm.
wiser journalists, not wiser. Anyway, some of the more seasoned journalists
Yeah,
that we deal with do prefer a phone call over an email.
they do.
Where again, so other journalists who are perhaps forging their way through their career, the thought of a lot of PRs ringing them on their phone, they just think absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. Why would I answer the phone? Why don't you just message me and I'll respond when I'm ready?
Yeah.
And so I do think there's a generational divide, and that will continue to shift. And
Mm.
going to your point on DMs,
Yeah.
that I think is still a very strong point. There used to be a lot of journalists on Twitter,
Yeah.
few less now as people have moved over to Blue Sky and other platforms are available. Um, but the DMs are open, as they used to say, and I do think that still works as a method or a channel of communication with
Massively
journalists and
so.
the media.
Massively so. I think kind of social media leverage, yeah. Obviously, Twitter that's now X. I mean,
Mm,
I'm off that, but you used to be able to say DMs are open and you would get a good response.
yeah,
But there's other ways. I find LinkedIn really good. You find some journalist pages will say, "Don't pitch to me on here.
yeah,
Here's my contact
yeah,
details."
yeah, yeah.
But again, that's fine because you're building a relationship and you're doing that. You're understanding the journalist and understanding their needs.
Okay,
I'd say also be respectful of time. That's a big one as well.
okay,
Make sure that you're clear and concise. And this comes down to the power of the pitch.
yeah,
We talk
yeah,
about, it's the strength of it. And stay adaptable. I think it's
yeah.
another thing. I think,
Okay,
be ready to embrace new ways of talking to journalists. But again, I think everything comes back to the relationship.
yeah.
Understand what works, understand what doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think this year for ourselves, we'll be putting a lot more effort into actually getting out and about to see journalists, and if journalists are not willing to
Mm.
travel to any of our events, because we found those particularly challenging
Hmm.
over the last few years to increase journalist attendance to some of the big
Yeah.
client events or big industry events that we've been attending. Um, we're going to make more of an effort to get out there to meet those journalists in their own backyard, as it will. And I think that's something, if as a
Mm.
tip to anybody out there who wants to engage in the media, I think you have to put the effort in more this year. If you want to build strong
Mm.
relationships, the onus is relying on you now, because people do appreciate the effort that people go to travel and meet them in person, rather than an email or a DM. I still think that we are social beings, and building that personal relationship uh, will have a lot of value, I think, this year. In addition to, like you said,
Mm.
keeping adaptable. Once you know how they want to be
Mm.
communicated with, being very flexible.
I think so. But again, build our relationships.
Mm.
And I think that is always something I find that clients and people that don't work in PR think, oh, you just do that. And it's like, it's not, it
Yeah,
takes a lot of effort.
mass mailing, and
Ugh,
spray and pray, which is not
no,
it's not about that, and we're super targeted in what we do, and
absolutely.
that's something that we're quite proud of. Okay, so then just to try and bring it to a close, then, because we could talk about this thing all day, as
We
we
could.
we generally do. Um, so some top tips then: be personable,
Yes.
um, power of the pitch, make sure that your story is relevant, and you only know that by doing your research on the journalist.
Yes.
Research beforehand,
Yes.
to try and understand their beat and what it is that they're talking about. That will improve your pitch. And yeah, be empathetic. They are only human beings at the end of the day, so they're under pressure as well, much like you are. And so be kind and understanding of that.
Absolutely. I think those absolutely top tips.
Great. Well, Thank you very much for your time today, and yeah, thank you for all of those who might be watching or listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Have a great rest of January, and I'll see you in a few weeks' time.
we'll do. Now we'll talk about that admin day.